Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our November Assessment Directors meeting. Darren is required to be at another meeting today, so he apologizes that he can't be here with us today. I apologize for my voice. I have not had a voice now for 6 weeks, so we're just going to have to, I unfortunately don't have to say much except for what I'm saying right now. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today we're going to get started. We don't have a quote because Darren's not here. So our quote is, be grateful. It's November. We have snow. The ski resorts are opening. We might be able to shower in August. So there's my gratitude moment for everyone. I'm super happy about it. So go ahead, Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela Battaglia, the NAEP State Coordinator. Don't see me much because there haven't been many NAEP tests lately, but we did get our results. It's kind of old news now. I'm sure most of you have heard this, but I will go ahead and talk about it. So we were kind of the shiny spot of NAEP land when we went back. Dr. Peggy Carr, she spoke about us and kind of shined the spotlight on Utah and how well we did compared to the rest of the nation. You know, we never, of course, want to see a decline in our Utah results, but we're also, you know, we had one of the smaller declines across the country. So there's many quotes. You know, there was things. You know, Dr. Peggy Carr was quoted. I was quoted in on a KUER paper. Washington Post talked about it. And we were just across the nation. Everyone was kind of talking about us. So that was great. It's good to hear when, you know, a year when things aren't great. Okay, so digging into the data, fourth grade math. I'll start there. We did see a 4-point drop in math. So we had a 240 this year in our NAEP data. The average for the nation was 235. So we've never dipped down below the nation, which is great. You can see the dot map of the United States. Everyone that's in gray is performing where Utah is performing. Everyone in a dark blue is performing lower than Utah. And only the Department of Defense is performing better than Utah. So you can see in the square boxes at the top where it's talking about who dipped down, how much, you know, how many states dropped. We were one of 43 states that dropped. 10 didn't see any change, and 0 saw an increase in their scores. I need to pull out the exact number to make sure that I'm telling you the right thing. So in fourth grade math, we did drop down from, you know, this ranking thing is, you know, not statistically accurate, but states really like to talk about it. We were 4th best in the nation, and now we're 7th best. That is the only area of 4th grade math where we saw a decline in our ranking. The reason why ranking doesn't really work is you can see from the dot map that all those in gray did the same as Utah. So this ranking, but you know, they really like to take the score, but we're also talking about sample size, as you all understand. So that's our 4th grade. Not terrible, but and we all know from our RISE data that we've seen a rebound. And we're still, our proficiency levels are probably going to keep us in that, you know, truth teller on the honesty report. So we're seeing the same thing in NAEP that we are seeing at our state level testing. Okay, then 8th grade math. Take a look at that one. Let's see. I've got the wrong page in front of me. There we go. Okay, so only Utah did not see a decrease, statistically significant decrease in their scores. That's where we were the shining star of the land of NAEP. It's great, fabulous, so exciting. You know we did decrease, but it wasn't statistically significant. We know that NAEP is doing a smaller sample size now. You know, cost savings, COVID, trying, you know, less exposure. So that was really good news. You can see that only state that is outperforming Utah is Massachusetts, which, you know, it's just amazing. We went up from 6th ranking position, again, not statistically accurate, but we went from 6th, now we're 2nd. All the light colored dots performing equal to us, dark blue performing lower than us, and then Department of Defense outperforming us, but they're always outperforming everyone. And they're not a state. So anyway, let's see, 4th grade reading. Okay, saw a 4-point decrease. And Nation again dipped more. We were one of, 30 states that saw a decline in our scores. And you can see the light gray, we're doing the same as. Dark blue, we are doing better than. And light blue outperforming us. On that one, we were, what was that one? 4th grade reading, 7th best. We dipped down there from 4th best to 7th best. So again, there's not that many. Massachusetts always outperforming us. Wyoming, Florida. And I don't know if any of you guys listened to that New York Times interview yesterday or a few days ago where they were looking at, why, Florida's claiming that's because they all went back to school, that they performed the same as California, who was out for, the longest of any state, I believe. So you can't, we can't claim anything from this information. Like, we did so well because we were back in school so fast. Remember that we did have a district that stayed out, and that didn't seem to impact our scores. And, that's a big district in Utah. So, and then last but not least, I believe, 8th grade reading. So no, we declined, but it was not statistically significant. We went from 6th position to 3rd position in the ranking. And you can see, outperforming most of the nation. So things look pretty good. People are going to want, they want to know what we can attribute it to. I just think that, our teachers have done an outstanding job. They were really creative and progressive in the way that they were teaching. I think that because we've been using technology for such a long time in the state that hope, maybe that had an impact. None of these numbers tell us why we're doing great, but we see the same thing in our RISE data. So that's really encouraging. I'm thrilled. It was good to be in the spotlight for a good thing. So thank you. Thank all your schools. It's great. If you have questions, throw them in the chat or speak up. Great.
Okay. We would like to encourage you guys to join us on Nearpod, especially when we get to the Acadian slides. They need some information from you. We have multiple polls and questions. So if you haven't joined the Nearpod yet, Amy has been typing the code into the chat. So as you're joining Zoom, if you would please join us in Nearpod. I don't know how many people are in the meeting, but we only have 26 people in our Nearpod right now. So we have 106 people joining the meeting, and 26 of you are in Nearpod. So consider this your hint. We need you. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Go ahead, Maureen.
Hi, I'm Maureen. I'm the assessment data specialist here. I have two topics I'm going to speak about today. First is National Blue Ribbon Schools. This is a recognition provided by the U.S. Board of Education or Department of Education for high-performing schools. All schools that participate in RISE testing are eligible for this from Utah. We rank schools based upon their RISE test performance, ELA and math combined. We invite 3 schools yearly to apply, and coming up this December, I'm going to be looking at the scores and determining who is eligible. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with me. I can tell you all the steps we go through to determine who's nominated. And you should be hearing something in December. Just a little reminder for rostering. We have 2 assessments that we send pre-ID files for. We just determine in advance which students are eligible, and we send one big file yearly. That's already been completed for WIDA, and I'm sure Megan will be discussing this later. Our ACT pre-ID file is going in right at the end of the month, so if you might want to make sure all your 11th graders are good to go in your SISs so that when our file goes, you have accurate information. And that's it. Once again, any questions, feel free to email me. I'm here for you.
Hey, Megan.
All right, and now we're on to WIDA. So we are very close to our first big old testing window of the year, Access. And as Maureen said, we have had the pre-ID file now submitted to WIDA DRC. So I want to say the date's never exact when IT pulls it, but it was sometime, I want to say in like late October.
It's like last week, I think.
Oh, they ended up just doing it last week? Okay. So
I thought it was November 18th, or excuse me, November 13th, or I don't know, somewhere in there.
So let's just say whatever you had in your SIS towards the beginning of November, that's what you should be seeing come December 5th, that first date that you see here in AMS. So they are all being processed and inputted into AMS. Again, starting December 5th, that's when you will be able to see all students that were rostered through the pre-ID file, and the test sessions are available for. Obviously, rosters change from now till January. Sure who that is. I fixed it. Okay. Oh, okay. No worries.
Okay.
I love hearing myself like 3 times. So if you have new students and new enrollment, students that have been identified, you will need to manually enter those into AMS. You should be receiving instructions on how to do that. Yesterday, our initial materials ordering window closed, but that initial material ordering window was only for alt access and Braille. Everything else is ordered by the state for you. And again, if you get new students that require materials, because they're not just strictly online, so kindergarten, maybe a student does need all, or for the younger grades for writing, you may need to order those, and that window opens up January 3rd to start ordering additional materials. And remember, you do need to be in the additional materials tab to place that order. We will be reminding you all along the way of all these things. Do just know that districts that requested to have their materials sent a little later due to the winter break, those have been submitted to DRC. They are preparing your shipments for later, but if you did not get that request in, you do need to plan on having people there on the 3rd or the 4th of January to receive shipment of materials, because they do need to be signed for. And again, you can contact DRC and you can get shipping updates and you can track so you know exactly when to expect those shipments. And then, as you know, January 5th, our window opens, so just reach out to Ann Michelle or myself for any questions. New supported system requirements. These requirements are valid starting the beginning of November. Please make sure that you are communicating the system requirements to your technology coordinators. Let's make sure that student devices are updated, and also your COS devices, test administrators, devices, everything is good to go before testing. Normally, a lot of the issues we see, I would say, are with COS devices not being updated. That's normally the one thing forgotten. So double check those. There are a lot of webinars, Q&A webinars available that WIDA and DRC will be hosting. Here are a few. And if you can't make these, They are always going to be recorded and they are posted in the WIDA secure portal, so you can access that through your account. So here are upcoming ones for November, which November 8th has already passed and November 15th has passed. But hey, you can make the 17th one right after this meeting. There you go. And as a reminder, we do have the WIDA Access Alternate Field Test happening. That window is later, towards the end of our regular access testing. There is a website dedicated to all things alternate access field test. You do not need to order any materials for this. WIDA and DRC are preparing everything. Even at the state don't have to do it. It's great. And they will be sending you those shipments. As we get closer to that field test, we will again let you know everything that you need to know. But the most important thing is that we are so happy we're finally here. We need as many people to participate in this field test as possible, because this field test not only updates our alternate access, it allows us to have more Braille items, more accessibility features, but also comes an alternate screener. Yay! Which we know is really, really needed. So the items that are field tested, some of them will go to create the alternate screener. So let us know questions. Training opportunities we have, register in Midas. We, outside of the regular Q&A webinars, we will be hosting our own Utah-specific webinars for test administrators and coordinator supports for access, alt access training, and kindergarten access training. Sign up because those are happening soon. And of course, our contact information. Please reach out if you have any and all questions. We are more than happy to help you and support you on your WIDA journey. I feel like the next time we're talking, we're going to be like in it, almost, like right there.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. Okay, so quick updates, reminders with DLM. Remember, rostering has to be done by you guys. The state is no longer doing rostering. So you might want to think about getting that going if you haven't started. There's a link there to a DLM district coordinator's Padlet. And in there is a TA document that will walk you through how to get those rosters created for your teachers. Reminder that teachers don't get a C-SPOR report until students are rostered to them. So think about that. The other thing is, I think next slide. There's a couple trainings coming up. I've got a training tomorrow in Ogden. There's a few seats left there if you've got teachers that you want to send to that. And then our last training, DLM training for teachers, will be in January. So there's the link to Midas and the course number to register for that. There we go. That's the slide I was looking for. Okay, so on that district test coordinator's Padlet, we did a training geared directly towards district test coordinators in October. It was recorded and it is now on the Padlet, so you can find that there on that Padlet. And then also the link to give out to your teachers. There's a Padlet created geared directly for those guys around administering DLM. So a couple of really good resources for you.
I'll put those links in the chat for you.
The links are embedded in the
Nearpod.
The links are not only just embedded in the Nearpod, they're also embedded in the slide deck that was sent to you with your meeting announcement today. So we don't need to. The
So
links
if
are
you
already
log
there.
into Nearpod,
Yeah,
you can click on that link.
and it'll take you
Get
right there. Okay.
Oh, okay. So sorry, I'm tagging two meetings at the same time. You see them, and so I'm not logged into our Zoom meeting. So what, Scott?
That's what Rick was asking, wasn't there training in Cedar City?
Yeah, there was. It was Monday. So that happened Monday. So we had to do some moving things around due to some snowstorms a couple weeks ago. So that happened Monday. So there's two more opportunities. If there's a need to do something, another online or some other training after the January one, if you've got teachers that can't make it, let me know and we'll see what we can do. I try to accommodate all of you guys to the best of my abilities, always. So reach out if there's something that we can do specifically to support you. Okay, a couple accommodation reminders. I'm pretty sure, I think, we blasted this out in an 80 memo, but in case you were not aware, the updated Utah Participation Accommodations Policy has been out for almost a couple months now. A month now?
think
It
so.
came out pretty early. Anyway, you can find it on the Special Education Assessment webpage. Please share it with staff. Really, the main changes here is Jessica has done a fantastic job digging into CTE and AP exams and has created some super fantastic additional accommodation guidance. So that's been placed in that manual for you, that policy. Okay, request forms, friendly reminder, accommodations, request forms. So any students that have Scribe or speech-to-text technology, any other assistive technology, Braille, or anything that is not covered in our typical manuals that students need for testing for Rise in Utah Aspire Plus, please start encouraging your special ed directors to have those start getting submitted. I am actually later this morning presenting the exact same information to special ed directors too. So I'm hitting you guys both at the same time. Please work with your special ed directors. Any request form for Utah Aspire Plus is still submitted on the standalone request forms that you can find on the Special Education Assessment webpage. Those get mailed to Jessica. Rise. If students need Scribe or any assistive technology for Rise, I think you can go to the next slide.
Tracy, we have a question.
Yeah, hold on one sec. Let me finish. So if you need Scribe or you need any other assistive technology for Rise, those request forms get submitted through Tide. So I have received no email pings that there have been any submitted so far. So if you have submitted, please shoot me an email, but please work on getting those done. It's not going to be pretty if come March I get 100 and something requests come through. Okay, so remember this year, if you have students that need a speech-to-text dictation assistive technology component that does not work within the system, we have embedded this year. So embedded dictation is right into the platform. We can turn that on. So we want teams to be able to use, or students to be able to use what they use instructionally, but we do have this embedded as well. So there will no longer be use a second device this year, or you could just decide to use embedded regardless. So anyway, you will find those choices in the Scribe request form. And we also have brought on embedded word prediction. So I talked to you about this in August, but just kind of a reminder, students have the ability to have that turned on as an accommodation, and it does one word at a time predicting out. Okay, yes.
If you have been trained and administered DLM in previous years, do you need to go to this year's training?
Oh, great question. Okay, so back to DLM. So all teachers are required to complete the DLM required training modules every single year. You are not required to come do training with me. So it's optional. When you do come do that full day training with me, we go through and complete all those training modules in the morning, and then we spend the afternoon getting into the system, looking at resources, answering questions. So it's up to teachers. Does that answer the question well enough?
So DLM modules each year in person?
No. So you have to complete the required DLM modules, every teacher every year, right, through their DLM training system, right? But you do not have to do that through me. It is not required to come to my training.
And then someone else followed up with all classroom teachers or just SPED teachers?
Teachers who will be administering the DLM. So whoever is put into the system, right, and that is going to administer DLM, and we're rostering students too. So all of those teachers, which most likely will be SPED teachers, but okay.
So if you're not in the Nearpod, because I know Teresa doesn't have a lot of slides about Keep and Peep, if you're not in the Nearpod and you administer Acadians, please jump into the Nearpod right now.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. I have one voice. This is my voice.
There's only one slide for Keep and Peep. So, just that the reports are available. So the 2021-22 data, I included links here, but they're also available on the USBE assessment page. And it just is reporting that state level data for the PEEP assessment, and the KEEP has state and then LEA level data. And I'm just going to give you a note that there's colored lines in the report, and they are indicating division by alphabetical order. So when I first looked at the report, I was trying to figure out how those schools related to each other and what the colored lines meant. And I asked, and it's just ease of finding schools within the list. So they don't mean anything about the actual scores. That's it. So now we're on to Acadians. So hopefully you have joined the Nearpod.
We're at 79. So I don't know.
yay.
There we go.
That might be all of our elementary.
That's right.
So just a reminder about that middle of year testing data entry windows. They are coming up fast. So our testing window starts December 1st, ends January 30th, data through the 28th of February. So please make sure you or have a plan in place as how you're going to administer those Acadians assessments. And we're not expecting to give any extensions at this point for those testing, so make sure you have a plan in place to get all of those students assessed before that window closes. And just a reminder, thinking about pathways of progress. And it is available for students who have beginning of year and middle of year data entered. And that score is going to show the level of growth that the student has made throughout the school year. At end of year, the goal for LEAs is that 60% of students have made typical or better growth. And then just a little bit about pathways of progress. What is it? How does it work? So it is comparing students that began at the same place. So who had the initial composite score at the beginning of the year. So in this example, we have two students, Janie, who has a score of 90, and Alyssa, who has a score of 130. Beginning of the school year, those two students would not be compared to each other. Their growth would not be compared because they have different composite scores. Next slide. Instead, all students like Janie, who had a score of 90 at the beginning of the year, their scores would all be compared at the end of the year and divided out into those 5 quintiles to determine the level of growth. And so we're really looking for that 60% of students making that typical or above typical growth. And then really students who are below, they need to make above typical or well above typical progress in order to start closing that achievement gap and to eventually get on grade level with their benchmark scores. And now our Nearpod poll. So does your LEA have any online elementary schools or students? Yes or no?
Make sure that it's working.
Maybe it was not a choice.
Maybe. Yeah.
You're seeing my screen. Should I answer?
Is it working? Okay, I just want to make sure. Oh, yep.
Whenever you think people have answered, you can move on.
We have 21 people who haven't answered yet.
Okay.
So.
So I have a growth question.
Yes.
If you have students, I understand that, similar students, you have obviously a group of students who come in, highly proficient or highly proficient, their change may be small. Are they still split into 4 groups?
Yes, they are still split into the quintiles. The difference is that when the state goes to look at their growth, if they meet the criteria for, what is the phrase, highly literate students, even if they make below typical growth, they're still counted as making typical
Because
growth.
we've had that problem before with high proficiency, maintaining becomes low growth, and therefore the school gets
Yes,
penalized for having low growth.
they do not. So when the state looks at those students, as long as they meet that criteria, and I can share out that criteria, I'll send that out in an AD memo. As long as they meet that criteria, they're like basically bumped to be making typical growth within the state's growth factor. So within Acadians, they're still showing that low growth, but when we look at that percent, those students are factored in at a typical level. Yeah, it's a lot harder to make growth when you're already really high.
We only have 12.6 people who have not answered, and I am looking to make sure it's not USB people, so.
I'm in
There's-
there. and I
there's-
did
No,
that.
I know. There's still a few LEA ADs or people on the call who have not answered. I can see.
Sid just shared a link for, she says, here's the information about the highly skilled learner in Acadians.
Okay.
And there's a link in there.
That was the word you're looking for, highly skilled. Yeah, that was the word. I was like, highly qualified? Yeah, highly literate. Literate.
Pink.
If anyone step away from.
So here's the,
Yeah,
On the
that's fine, we
CD.
can move. Okay,
so there you go. There's our results.
okay.
So we have about
28%.
60 say no, 27.8 say yes. The 12 no answer would include some of us who are locked into the, who would answer as well, and plus secondary owned schools, so we're in good shape. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Just in looking at the data, both Jared Wright and I have seen that online schools are having lower Acadian completion rates, and it is affecting those overall completion rates. So we just kind of wanted to talk about like what could we do to help you, and what are some ideas that people might have. So let's move on to our next poll. Another one. Yes, so just thinking about challenges that impact your LEA completing those Acadians assessments at specifically your online schools, and check all that apply, because we would just like to get some information at the state level, like what are the problems and challenges so that we can help think through like how you might mitigate those. So I'll give you a minute because there is a list to look through.
And it won't show up on the, when I'm showing it, you'll have to scroll. Those of you in the Nearpod, you will have to scroll because all of the choices do not show up on our screen here. So we do have 91 people in the Nearpod now, so we're making progress.
Thank
you.
We appreciate your participation and your input.
And we have not set a timer on this, but we will give you a couple minutes because like we said, there are a lot of choice and you can choose all that apply, just as a quick reminder. So,
Yeah, it is multi-select.
I will share the responses when we're done, but if I hit share, nobody can answer, so.
Question online, assuming that we don't have online students, we don't respond.
Yes, I would say if they don't have online students, or if they want to respond to just that problems that they have with assessing students, you could still do that, although a lot of the options won't apply. So. So that would be not expecting all the schools to answer that, so.
Yeah. We have about 26.8 who haven't answered. Do you want me to share now? Are we good? Okay, if there's anybody who didn't get a chance to answer the Nearpod, quickly chap in the chat, just put an X or something in the chat. Otherwise, I'll close the poll. Okay, all right. There you go. Looks like the highest answer is more parents excluding students and difficulty in having a parent adult present during the test administration. The difficulty scheduling assessment times are the top three. So.
Thank you for your feedback. That just helps us to know what challenges people are having. And the next question is just a collaboration board, thinking if you do administer Acadians online, or even if you don't, but you might have some suggestions of how you could mitigate those challenges, just share out some thoughts. So we do have some of our online schools that had pretty high completion rates. So what are you doing? How are you overcoming these challenges?
Teresa, are you using?
We have a comment in the chat.
Okay.
Good.
Oh, okay. It's a long one.
You may want to read it out loud.
So it is cultural travel over the missing December and January being out of the country. Okay.
That's from Anna Lynn.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Carolyn, go ahead and just send me an email and we can chat about that. Just kind of thinking about what might you be able to do to try and solve that. Because if they're gone the entire month of December and January,
Well, you can.
no.
But wouldn't, I mean, so you wouldn't have an MOI, but you could still at least hopefully do a BOI and an EOI. I mean,
Yes. So you
you gotta
definitely
do the best you can,
Yeah,
right?
you definitely want to provide, if the student was on benchmark, still do a progress monitoring probe as soon, as possible, before they left and when they came back, just to see if there are any concerns that you need to address with that child. And then if they are below grade level, then they should be receiving progress monitoring at the rate that is recommended. So you would still have that data. So yeah, if they literally are gone the entire assessment window, then you can administer online if they're still receiving education through an online service. But we don't recommend administering online if they're receiving their education in person.
Really quickly, I would be curious. So I like the one very clear parent contract with signature on testing guidelines. I'd be curious to know more about that. Like, is it something that parents, is it just part of enrolling in the online program they have parents sign up for? Anyway, I find that
Yes.
that could be a good one. I don't know.
Yeah. Whoever wrote that, we'd love to add a comment to your own comment with some, maybe some additional information.
I know who that is. I could say her.
Oh, I was like, I can't, because it just shows a little box.
Because that could be something to model,
Yeah,
right? Like if
definitely.
there's something and that makes that's making an impact, right? I'll be quiet now.
I don't believe you.
So she wrote, it's something parents and students have to sign before they complete their testing appointment. And they do one-on-one appointments. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. Hopefully there are some ideas there that you might be able to take, and we will definitely be looking through them as well and sending out some additional thoughts. I want to go ahead and go to the next slide. So we do have remote administration guidelines for Keep Acadience Reading and Acadience Math for those students who are receiving instruction in a remote setting. So a student who just leaves for a couple months but doesn't actually receive instruction during that time in a remote setting would not really qualify just because they are not receiving that instruction remotely as well. So there is a link to those remote administration guidelines that are available, and please utilize them. There's some suggestions on how to administer those assessments remotely and to make it more successful for students and for parents and for teachers. And the suggestions that you put in, we will look at adding as kind of a addendum. Here's some additional ideas or things that you could consider to help this experience be successful. And then just a reminder that a reading assessment of some kind is required for all students in grades 1 through 3. So even if their parents did opt them out of Acadience Reading or they haven't taken it, there does need to be some type of reading assessment that you give as an LEA that determines if the student is below grade level in reading. And then any student who is below grade level does need a diagnostic assessment. They need to be provided reading interventions that are specific and focused on what they need, and then progress monitored at the required rates. So please make sure that even if you have students who did not take Acadience Reading, that you are still following these state guidelines, making sure that all students who need reading assistance are receiving it.
Any questions in the chat or comments?
Yep.
Good.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. We're going to have Elise join us remotely. She's working with parent review this week. So.
All right. So just a few things with Apple testing. As a reminder, before you do your administration, to complete a systems check, just to ensure that any audio is working appropriately. So for example, if you look at this little the screenshot, you can see that I have 2 green check marks that tell me that my bandwidth and my web browser are working appropriately, but you can see that there's the little blue circles that are showing that the microphone and the video are not working appropriately. And those are kind of your clues that there's something wrong with the systems check. So if there's something wrong with that systems check, don't begin testing. Contact Apple Help and start to do some troubleshooting. Next slide. As a reminder, the window for Apple testing closes December 2nd. We are in the thick of it. This screenshot was test completion as of, I believe it was Tuesday, and I actually checked it again this morning, and we have just over about 19,000 tests still unadministered of the over 66,000 that were ordered. So we're even further along now, which is great. Next slide. A couple of things as we are now into testing, and many of you are getting scores back. I want to go over some tips for avoiding the UR rating. So make sure very first that your students are answering in the target language, because sometimes questions are offered in English as clarification, and we understand that that can be confusing for your students because people then want to answer in English, and that's not the case. So make sure they're answering in the target language. Again, run that systems check. Another great tip for avoiding that UR is to clear any cache or cookies on the browser, and then work to minimize any background noise as much as possible so that the raters can hear the student very clearly through those headsets. If you do get a student who is issued a UR rating, a new test code is going to be issued overnight so that the student can retake the component and it can be re-administered the following day. Next slide.
Elise? I
Yes.
have a question. What do we do about kiddos that have had tech difficulties that went unnoticed until the test was complete?
So if you end up with a score that you kind of question, this is actually a really great lead-in for this slide, you can submit a rating review. So if you feel like there may have been some technical difficulties and the student has submitted the test, when you get their score back, if you're looking at it and going, this doesn't quite match up with what I feel matches the student's abilities, you can submit the component to be rescored by LTI. You submit through the applehelp@languagetesting.com email. Rating reviews still have to take place during the window though. So the later you test, the less time you have to submit rating reviews. So be thinking about that. When you submit a rating review, you're going to need the SSID. Please do not send student names in an email to protect the PII. You'll also need the teacher cactus, the testing component that you would like to be rescored, and any details that you can provide surrounding the request. So if there were some technical difficulties, explain those as much as you can in detail, because that aids in how the raters can rescore the test. And just as a heads up, when you submit those rating reviews, please know that it can take up to 10 days for those to occur, because it's re-rated by a human rater, and those take time. Any other questions for rating reviews?
No.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next one, there's a difference between a rating review and a test reorder. So after a rating review, if the test comes back and you still aren't sure about the score itself, or if there were other complications that occurred, a test reorder will happen. And this is when it's not a UR. This might be like a below an N1 or something like that. When you need to do a test reorder, you need to submit the request to myself and to Carl Bowman. Those still also need to occur during our testing window. You provide the same amount of information, again, the SSID, the teacher cactus, the test component, any details, as that helps us review the situation internally to determine if we can reorder another test for the student or if the rating that has already been given stands, okay? So we review those internally and we communicate with you as soon as we can. Just understand that some of those not rating requests, sorry, some of those test reorders are granted and others are not.
Elise, would you like to share like the ones that are not grounded when it's not a test reorder?
So usually we do not grant them if you have already submitted that retest request. Not retest, sorry. It gets confusing even for me. The rating review, because when you get a rating review, it's already being rated by a second rater with the understanding that the first one was not sufficient for the teacher or student. And so they are already aware that they are listening for for a specific purpose. And so if there were technical difficulties, that is caught by the UR and then it's reissued. If it's re-rated that second time and the rater still comes back with a score, it means that there was enough evidence provided in the recording for the rater to give a score. Another kind of interesting thing when we do a rating review, the original score is not presented to the rater. They don't know what it was originally scored as. So they just know that it's being sent for a rescore. So generally, if there was any technical difficulty, they automatically bump those through to the UR so that it regenerates the test code and information for the student on the following day. But if you submit a rating review and it comes back and it's still the same score, generally those ones are not going to be reordered when you submit them to the state because it's already gone through a second level of rating before it came to us. So that's one to kind of be aware of. Test reorders that we tend to grant are going to be things like a student started the assessment and then was absent for a long period of time and the test auto submitted because there is that auto submit option. I believe it's 14 days that the test remains open, but the student returns to school and the test is no longer available. Things like that, we will reorder so that the student can take it where that was not something that was out of their control. Also with those test reorders, you're totally fine. With the test reorders, they need to be submitted by an LEA or admin level user. A teacher can submit a rating review, but teachers should be communicating with their ADs or the LEA leader, because some of you use a DLI coordinator instead of your AD to communicate with your DLI schools, which is great, but those need to come from the admin level user account rather than the teacher level user account, because when we do a test reorder, some of you have those permissions granted where you can reorder them, but generally those have to come from the state level. And so we use the Move It file, and as admin level users, you have access to your Move It file that Emily accesses through USBE. And so those requests have to be submitted with the forms appropriately through the Move It file, then I can pull them and upload them. So it's not something that can just be communicated through an email.
We're
All
also,
right,
you might want to
Oh, you're
discuss the amount of student PII that's been sent in the last 3 weeks directly from teachers for DLI. It's getting very concerning, like multiple entire lists of student names with SSIDs, the school, the teacher, the cactus, being sent unencrypted emails multiple times through threads within your LEA to different people, as well as them being sent on to Elise. And we want to make sure that everyone's aware that the teachers who are giving Apple tests are also receiving their Apple test administration training, because apparently based on the emails that we're receiving, there is a missing link at the LEA or school level where these teachers are not receiving any test administration training whatsoever for their Apple tests. And that is a violation of testing ethics, and it needs to, we are really concerned. Last year it was bad. It's about 5 times worse this year. So, and it's interesting because it's certain LEAs more than others, so we can clearly see which LEA ADs and DLI coordinators have been doing their work versus the ones that have just literally, to be blunt, kind of thrown their teachers under the bus, because the questions that Elise is getting are really, as the person in charge of testing ethics, we're quite concerned, and I see all those emails. So we wanted to bring that up again today, that as we're getting to the end of the window, we're reviewing again the proctoring guides. Many of the issues are no one has done a systems check with the students, and they had no idea that they should. So there's just a lot of issues, and I told Elise I'd back her up on this and be the hammer. So I'm the hammer today. So do your work, guys. Let's not let the kids suffer through this. It's not fair to anyone, the teachers, and especially not the students.
We do also recognize as well with some of our DLI teachers, they start into your school year and maybe weren't there for your initial training for those DLI teachers. And so it's still important to, if you hire new teachers a few weeks into the school year, into September or even beginning of October, as we've even had some new teacher accounts created the last few weeks, ensure that those teachers are getting the support that they need, because they haven't had anything if you provided something in August or in early September. All right, so moving on for RISE, go ahead and go to the next slide. Our mid-year summative window is open and will continue through December 23rd. benchmark modules are always available during the mid-year summative window. And just note that any summative tests that are started before that March 3rd date need to be submitted before the March 3rd date. I would also kind of put a plug in here since the summative window is open for those mid-year courses to maybe double check your testing windows, as we've had a couple of summative assessments administered in error. And so just make sure you've got your windows set so that those will be able to be administered seamlessly in the springtime without having to do some testing appeals. Next slide. For tech configuration, as a reminder, you will want to disable your auto updates because you run the risk of preventing students from accessing RISE. So for example, if you have acquired new devices for this school year, you'll want to ensure that they are compatible with the tech configurations that we have published on the technology resources on the RISE portal. And any changes to that, they will come in AD meeting or in memos and also announced through the portal. So if you haven't signed up for the portal updates, you'll want to do that. That way, just if there's ever any question, you know if your devices are going to be compatible or not for RISE administration.
At least we have a question. Mid-year
Yes, it does, Brooke.
also has a window from January 3rd to March 3rd.
Yep.
Correct?
It does continue after that winter break. It has that closing portion through the winter holidays that it's not accessible, but it does reopen again.
The system goes offline from December 23rd through January 3rd, so nobody can test that, but it's the same mid-year summative window.
All right, next slide. So for Utah Aspire Plus, we are gearing up slowly for our spring administration. The schedule of events will be under the Utah Aspire Plus tab. Just as a reminder, we've had a few enhancements and updates come from the website, so things are a little more streamlined. There's a tab at the top for Pearson Access Next, which is your administration portal. Then you've got Utah Aspire Plus with all of its information, and then the high school benchmarks tab is separate so that those administrations have different pieces of communication that help as far as administration goes, and so it just has helped to separate that. But the schedule of events will appear under the orientation menu when it is ready. It is being reviewed currently for web tagging. Next slide. The spring 2023 administration training is going to be held Wednesday, January 18th from 1 to 3. You can register right now. It's MIDAS course 62091 if you are interested. If that time doesn't work for you or if you have some conflict, we will be recording it for future viewing and it will be posted on the assessment YouTube channel and available later. I can see a question from Jenny Wilson. If we have had teachers give a RISE benchmark but cannot access the completion reports, is that a testing windows issue? Jenny, that's a great question. I don't think it is a testing windows issue. If you send me an email with what you're experiencing, I can kind of troubleshoot. I'm wondering if it's more of a selecting the time period in the reporting, because we have to change the time period of what you want to access as well as select the test you want to access when you're in the RISE reporting portion. But if you send me an email, I can help you with that. Next slide. We're good to go. Any other questions for RISE, Apple, or Utah Aspire Plus or high school benchmarks? I'll be monitoring the chat as we continue and I can answer there, or you can send me an email. When can you start setting up sessions? Carolyn, I would wait until after that January training, that January 18th, to set up your sessions.
Cool. ACT updates. I'm Scott Ross Kelly, your friendly neighborhood science and ACT guy. Last AD meeting, someone asked for COVID impact data for the LEAs, and initially the answer was no, but ACT did do some digging and did get us some data, and I have that data. It's for school districts only. It's not for charter schools. One of the reasons why is charter schools, for the most part, just don't have enough students taking the test to actually have reliable data generated for this. But it is raw data. It's not the nice, pretty graph that that we showed last AD meeting. If you would like to have that raw data, I'm happy to send it to you. Just send me an email. Let me know what district you're with, and I will send you your raw data for just your district. My email is right there on the slide. Just a reminder of what that looks like. Those are the graphs we had. And there are a lot of columns in this data. Like I said, it's really raw. The one that shows the bounce back response are columns L and Q, and they're labeled as a T-score. Remember, numbers below 0 mean the school students have not bounced back to pre-pandemic levels. Numbers above 0 means they have bounced back and are doing better than pre-pandemic levels. And this was our Utah ACT results across the entire state. So if you want to compare your LEA to the rest of the state, here's another copy of that data for you, showing that we had that huge bounce back in reading, right? And overall, though, we're about back to ground zero, bouncing back to pre-pandemic levels, at least on that. So like, that data is in the raw data. You just got to do some data mining to find it, but we're happy to at least share that to you. And a big thank you to the people at ACT that at least got us that data. They've got a lot of data to mine through to get that for us, but at least we got that. Question, if ACT student data needs to be ready to roster on November 28th, then will roster show up in the ACT? I think that was going back with what Marina said about the pre-file, right?
Yes.
But that's just to get the
information to ACT.
right. And so that data, if I remember right, December 8th is when the information will go into the into the PA Next system. So the roster should be showing up beginning the second week in December for that question. And so online training, we have online training, and if you want to get relicensure credit, you can sign up for it in Midas. If you don't want credit, you can just join the webinar located at the Zoom link that's there. The time will be at 3:30. It should be about an hour. I've already looked over the slides. There's not a lot of slides for the online training, unlike the paper training, in which there are a lot of slides. So test coordinators, technician, to anyone, technical coordinators, ADs, teachers who proctor the test are more than welcome to show up for this online training webinar. This Midas link has also been updated on our schedule events. So if you're looking for it, you can always go to the scheduling of events for that. Next slide. So my ACT for students, ACT is saying that after December 9th, or after all that data gets uploaded, you should have your students at least sign into their My ACT accounts as soon as possible, especially to eliminate possible issues they may have, because we get a lot of people who kids don't sign up to this until the day or the day before they take the test. And then you find out there's problems. One of the more common problems is some of our students actually have a My ACT account because they're ambitious or their parents are, and they go to sign up for the one that now has been generated for your LEA, and there's a conflict because there's two accounts, and now we don't know which one it is. It gives them a chance to pick the schools they want ACT to send their scores to, and you can make sure they're insured at least enrolled in the system. Students not enrolled within PA Next after January 20th won't get that claim code to actually get them to start the test for paper tests. So make sure that if they're in there, that they're up and running and things to go. Some other information from ACT about that I just got yesterday about that test. That account, that My ACT account. That login actually has a couple of benefits for the students. There is a practice test available for students in there. And if you want them to get some practice besides using the tests that are with Schmoop, there's a chance to get one right. Nice little practice test right from ACT. Students can also sign up to get emailed every day the ACT question of the day. And so they can actually get an email on a regular basis that gives them a little bit of insight to what those questions look like and what they're going to be seeing on the ACT when they take it. And so there's a couple little nice little things that are available there within that system, at least for the students to be able to get some prep work done. We figure, hey, every little bit helps. So give them a little heads up, and better do that a couple of months before they take the test. So anyway, that's just up for your consideration there. Next slide is paper administration. We've had some requests about and some phone calls from ACT about people doing the paper test in the third window. If you're planning on testing with paper in the third window, we really ask you not to do that. We've had problems, and ACT has had issues in the past with things like FedEx issues. They were telling me about one school district in another state that FedEx lost all the boxes that were to be delivered that day, and it took a week to fix.
Sorry.
If that's your testing date and you don't get the paper, there's a problem because there's no other windows after that. There's no way to fix that. We all know that snow days happen and kids can't get to school sometimes, and so things happen to that. Also, if you have any kids that are absent, there's no other available times for them to be able to take that test. So with paper testing, there's only 1 day per window. You've got to pretty much hit that day. And if you're doing it on the third window, you've got no options. If you're doing it in the second window and FedEx does mess up or you do have a snow day, you can still go into the third window. That's not a problem. ACT is very, very accommodating for that. Online testing does have that benefit, though. Remember, each window has 6 testing days. And if you can't make your March testing date, you can still test in April and you still get 6 other dates. And there's just a lot of availability and flexibility with online testing. And so I had a question about getting charter school data for pre and post COVID, and no, I don't have a way to get that. I'm sorry. The best thing you could do would be actually look at your actual results and compare that to the state results. Again, the problem is most of the charter schools just do not have enough students in their student bodies. So we generate this. You get these massive error bars that essentially make it, there's just no statistical difference. There's no way to tell if there's actually an effect happening. And that just goes to sampling and testing error, things that happen on that. Other than that, just double check my notes right now. Yeah, everything else is going smooth. I want to thank everyone for all the feedback and the help as I've been learning this new position, because there's been a lot growing curve for myself and learning the new system and what's going on with it. But appreciate everyone's feedback and help on that, especially the phone calls that come back and say, hey, just so you know, this is what I found out from ACT. And I'm like, awesome, because that's information that would help me out. So thanks for those calls and everything else coming in.
And a reminder, a plug to accommodations for ACT. Please get those submitted now. Start now. If you can have your teachers have those in before Christmas break. That way if there's problems, they can resubmit. We have had LEAs that didn't submit for accommodations. They passed the deadline. There is nothing Jessica or Scott can do to help you. And that becomes a denial of faith. So please, please, please. We are presenting that to special ed directors again here in about an hour. So we'll remind them, but don't forget that.
Typically,
The deadline's January 12th.
January 12th is
January
deadline.
12th, 2023, and there is
It's
no
coming
wiggle
fast.
room on that.
The ACT told me yesterday that they've had about 11 or 1,200 requests for accommodations. Only 18 have been denied, but typically we have over 3,500. So we're only about a third of the way there, just barely.
Oh, and hot off the press too, I don't know, Jessica, if you're on or she wants to jump in. I'm still in your fire, sorry. But so we're presenting it
She's
to,
online.
I know, so we're presenting to special ed directors because it literally just came in. We were wrapping up slides yesterday, so it didn't make it here. But ACT by the end of this week should have their system updated to match the new process, right? Where you're not required to submit all that extra documentation. You just submit the IEP 504. So they finally have that updated, hopefully by the end of the week to make that smoother. But okay.
Jessica, do you have anything else to add? Oh, we can't hear you.
Maybe not.
She's shaking her head.
She's sick.
Yeah. It's fine.
It's fine.
She said it's fine. That was just
Okay.
good.
Yeah, she says it's fine.
Email, well, we'll throw Jessica's, you can email Jessica if you have any questions too. So she's been awesome with ACT.
Can I add to that? So with the accommodations, I think one of the biggest things that has been overlooked when you think accommodations, typically it's applying accommodations to our students with any kind of disabilities, but it's also accommodations for your English learners as well. And I would say, Jessica, shake your head, yes, if you would say that's probably one of the biggest areas we see issues with when applying for accommodations is with our English learners.
She's shaking her head up and down.
Yeah.
She's
Yes.
nodding.
Yeah, but you gave us a reminder to check decision notifications, to see if they were accepted or if you need to follow up.
Absolutely.
If you don't check that, you won't know.
Yes, and that's a really important step because last year we had a few that thought they submitted and didn't check and they were rejected for some additional information and then missed the deadline. And then again, it's one of those rules that we unfortunately can't do. So believe it or not, we are done. It is 10:11. So if anybody has any questions out there or has anything they need to discuss, we'll give a couple minutes for anybody to jump on. Maybe we're all here. We're just not all in the same room. So if anybody has anything that they need to ask, feel free to type in the chat or jump off mute and we will listen.
Jessica added one, I can't hear myself
Okay.
talk and talk at the same time. Jessica did add in the chat, just a reminder that you need to check the decision notifications to see if accommodations were accepted or if they need follow-up. Also, the ACT USB page has a one-page document for EL guidance, so check that out as well.
Jessica's been very busy putting together extra TA guidance for everybody. She's been awesome. So
Oh, not only that, she's been driving and pushing ACT to make a lot of very important changes. So
Yep.
So it's not just affecting Utah, it's affecting the country. So she's been doing a great job.
Carolyn put in the chat, submitting the WIDA historical report as part of the ACT accommodations for MLLs. It's been helpful with approvals. And if you ever need current reports, especially reports that show growth per our accountability systems, you can get those from David Mackey.
I think what ACT takes though is it has to be WIDA. It has to be the current WIDA score.
Yeah, and so you can get those reports, a CSV file from David in our data and statistics department of all your current students and their most current scores and also growth proficiency per Utah's accountability system. So I'll put his email in the chat.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question, and I might have missed it, or this honestly might be the wrong group to ask, but I'm going to give it a shot here. Graduation rates, I know we got our files for final graduation rates for last year. Is there a place to see the state's graduation rate?
I think it's in the data gateway. The person to ask would be email Aaron Bruff. When you guys type it, email Aaron and he can probably help you with that because they know more about where everything's been loaded and when it's been loaded and where it is in the data gateway if it's there.
A whole section for state
So, yeah,
graduation rate
so-
in the data gateway.
Oh, here's perfect. Thank you.
Question about ethics. Can teachers have non-academic rewards for attendance during testing?
Non-academic rewards for attendance during testing. My first inclination would be no, because unless everyone is getting the reward. The key with this, when you start talking about non-academic rewards is what is the purpose of giving candy to kids just to show up for school? What is the academic purpose for that? You know, now if everyone's getting a treat, everyone, whether they've been excluded from the test or not, everyone should get the treat, you know? So if you show up, you get the treat. But there should be no connection to you're attending school because we're testing, so we're going to give everyone a donut. That implies that it has to do with the testing and not with school attendance. So the thing to always ask yourself is what is the purpose for doing this? Are you trying to get kids to take the test? Or are you just trying to encourage better attendance and why is that only occurring during testing? So I wish I could be clearer than that, but that's really how that kind of works.
If you're giving them donuts every day, continue.
Pretty much.
And why didn't we get some?
Yes, I know. So, but I hope that helps a little bit. So you need to be really careful with this non-academic reward thing because it really implies that we're rewarding students for taking, and it is a very hot button issue that is monitored very, very closely by lots and lots and lots of people.
And I know it's come up with our SPED department and has some of the coaching that we've got going and people are asking, and I know it's trying to increase participation, right? Like I get that. So I still firmly believe that the best way you can get that increased participation and buy-in from parents is if you are using the data in an actionable way and you're sharing that information with parents and they understand, right, how important it is to their child's educational direction. That's my.
Yeah, and I think it works better, because we talk a lot about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And, sugaring time is probably not the best thing to always do, but that's the big question. It's perfectly fine to walk around and give students a lifesaver during testing, as long as all the kids who are excluded from testing also get lifesavers, okay? We're not telling you can't get snacks. We're not, because for some kids that may be the only breakfast they received if they got here late, that kind of thing. That's not what's being said. It's really what is the purpose of the reward. So that would be the best advice I can give. Any other questions?
Just got one. If a school has been identified as critical needs as of the most recent report card, what are the next steps they need to take?
The person I would reach out to would be Tracy Vandeventer with that. And somebody can type her, I know how to spell the last name, but if you guys need help, but you would want to reach out to Tracy Vandeventer, who is the coordinator over that. That's particular, the director actually over student support. But Tracy Vandeventer is the person that you'd want to reach out for what the next steps are. Anything else? Okay. Well, if that's everything, guys, thank you so much for attending. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. The next meeting we have is December 15th. We're all wearing our ugly Christmas sweaters, so feel free to join us online in your ugly Christmas sweaters. We decided to celebrate the fact that it's the end of 2022. And we're just going to celebrate the end of the year, so we're wearing our ugly Christmas sweaters. Feel free to join us on December 15th at our last meeting of 2022. So thank you so much, and have a great day. Feel free to email us if you have any other questions. Bye.